What's going on, guys? My name is Rye, and welcome to the RYsing Legend YouTube channel. Today, what I've got for you guys is a deck profile for the V Premium Cardfight Vanguard format, and it is of my Royal Paladin Clan Thingsaver Dragon Grade 2 Toolbox deck. Now, some of you are going to be like, what the heck do you mean Thingsaver Grade 2 Toolbox? Well, you see, this is an original brew that I've kind of been working on for years now. Every time there's new support, I try to fine-tune the deck, make it better. But yeah, we're just gonna show off the current version of the deck and explain all our choices and the reasons for some of these choices. But yeah, let's go ahead and get right to it. Okay. So, of course, it being a Thingsaver deck, we have 4 copies of this beautiful, beautiful dragon. 4 copies of Seeker Thingsaver Dragon. I love this deck so much, I got the highest rarity of it. And now I have, no money. Card gamer problems, am I right? But yeah, 4 copies of Thingsaver Dragon. It is essentially what we call a delayed double Vanguard swing skill. You don't get to do it right away the turn you ride it, but it's a skill that when it's placed to call Blast Blade Seeker from the deck and give it power for each force marker you have in play, more than makes up for not being able to do speed ride, because it gives us a big number and it can give us multiple crits to work with. Because when that Blast Blade Seeker enters when Blast Blade Seeker is played on the rear guard or Vanguard, you could discard a card to give your Seeker Vanguard a critical of 2 if your opponent's Vanguard's grade is equal or greater to yours, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, main boss unit in the deck, 4 copies. I love Thingsaver. I've been playing this deck for years, fine-tuning it and trying to make it the best it could be. Kind of figure out what the problems were and trying to find solutions to problems. One of the biggest problems with this deck is it had no early game. The problem with people running the Jewel Knight Thingsaver variant is it has a really awful early game because the Jewel Knights are literally vanilla in the early game, and you're just calling down a bunch of things that do nothing in the early game to try to rush your opponents, and it's just awful. So instead, that's why I'm building a Grade 2 Toolbox variant with our Toolbox man himself, an absolute Blade Knight Livaro. This card's the lifeblood of the deck. He literally is so necessary to draw. You have to have him, because he literally fetches you anything you want in the entire deck. And he has an alternate cost. Yes, he can only use his skill when placed from hand, but that's not a big deal. So the skill is, if you have no face-up cards in your damage zone, you could pay his cost with one Soul Blast instead of a Counter Blast. When he's placed on Vanguard or Rear Guard, you can search your deck for up to 1 Grade 2 card and call it to an open Rear Guard and shuffle your deck. Yes, it says call it to an open Rear Guard, which matters a lot. And we have a lot of stuff that we have a decent amount of stuff that could clear themselves off the field to make this work. But he's just so important to the deck, because you need to be able to find your stuff. Your pieces are really important. And speaking of really important things, you can't have Thingsaver Dragon without the mate, Blast Blade Seeker. We're only running 3 copies of it. You only really need 3. 4 you can kind of brick on a little bit. If you kind of want to see it, you don't really want to see it much, but you also want to make sure it doesn't hit your damage zone. If you hit 1 or 2 in your damage, at least you'll have the 1 left. It's very rare they'll all go to damage. Even if they do, we can still heal them out. So, 3 copies. You need it to run it with Thingsaver Dragon. And plus, he can make your Thingsaver a lethal threat if your opponent's at 4 damage and you're going second. You call this out and make your Thingsavers critical 2. And you guys might not like to hear this, but hear me out. Force 2. If I'm going second, my opponent's at 4 damage, I'm going Force 2. So then that'll be a 30k column and a 23k column with my Vanguard, each swinging for 2 damage. And if I drive check a critical trigger, that's 3 units attacking for lethal, and my opponent has to guard everything. It's good. It matters a lot. 3 copies, it's all you really need. You also kind of want to be wary of, there being a Narukami matchup. Narukami can really hurt if you leave your Blaster Blade Seekers vulnerable and they get rid of them, and you have none left. You got to really be careful against Narukami. And control in general. We got next. We have 3 copies of Jewel Knight. What is your name? Explode Jewel Knight Lail. Yes. We're running some Jewel Knights, but we're not running a lot. There's like 8 in the entire deck. 3 of her. You typically want to ride her if you can, especially going second, because if you go second, you ride Thing Saver over her. You get your Blaster Blade Seeker out, give your Thing Saver a critical 2, go Force 2 on another column. Your Vanguard column could be swinging for 33k with 2 crit. Your Blaster Blade Seeker column will be 30k, 2 crit. Drive check another crit, and that's going to be potentially up to 33k on that one if you have a Lail in that column with AK booster. Maybe even 35 if you have a certain thing. She's also your recursion piece as well. She's one of your offensive rear guards that gain power that don't need to boost when attacking in some scenarios. She's overall one of the best Jewel Knights, and you really do need her in the deck. But I don't think I would run any less than 3 or 2. I don't really want to cut her to 2 because I really like to see her ride her. But next, we got 2 copies of one of my favorite Royal Paladin cards. We have Knight of Chivalry Robble. This card does so much, but the best part about this is it tells your opponents, no. No. You want to retire my back row? No. So, what he does is his bottom skill is while he's in your front row, your opponent cannot retire your back row rear guards unless they retire him first. And it's even more funny when you have 2 of them, because it's like, okay, I'm going to retire your Robble, and then I'm going to try to retire your back row, and it's like, I still have 1 more Robble, buddy. You got to retire that Robble, and then retire the back row rear guard you want to retire if you can. And it's just so funny, because it's just, no. On top of that, he does let you filter out your hand. So if you draw any cards you don't want in your hand that are not grade 2, of course, he can put those back to deck for you, and he can help you draw to kind of dig for your Thing Savers. One thing I particularly like to do with him is, if I call Sisylas and try to check the top 5 and don't hit my Thing Saver in the top 5, I can call down the Robble, bottom deck my Sisylas, draw 2, potentially hit either Thing Saver or another Sisylas to dig even further for my Thing Savers. He's just overall so good. I love this card so much. And then, one of the things that we want to tell our opponents to know about retiring, 2 copies of Starlight Violinist. Now, you might be looking at me like I'm a crazy guy. That's partially true. But there's good reasoning. So you see, the problem with Blaster Blade with Thing Saver is if you leave your Blaster Blade Seekers in the front row, your opponent's going to go so far out of their way to try to kill him. And so, by putting him in the back row with Violinist, your opponent can't attack into it at all. On top of that, when you have Robble in the front row and he's in the back row, he's telling your opponents, you cannot retire Blaster Blade Seeker until you get through me first. So, we're protecting it. We're taking the power it gets from Thing Saver, making it into a very big booster. Because when Thing Saver calls Blaster Blade Seeker out of the deck, it gives Blaster Blade Seeker 10,000 power for each force marker you have. And if you call it out on your superior ride turn, that Blaster Blade Seeker is suddenly a 30k booster. Putting him behind Robble or any 10k grade 2 unit, that makes it 40k. And if you're going second and it's force 2, that's 40k with a crit. And then you're going to use Blaster Blade Seeker skill, make your Thing Saver have a crit as well, making your Thing Saver 23 or even 33k if you put a trigger on the Violinist that'll be right behind your Vanguard. the numbers can get very pressuring just without the force 1s. And by adding the force 2s on top of that power, it makes it even more scary for your opponent to deal with. So Violinist overall just really good. Next up, I actually would have been running a third Violinist if this card didn't come out, but this card's just so good I had to drop it down by at least to 2. Because we at least want 2 of this. The Knight of Instant Flash. Cataphale? Is that how it's pronounced? Cataphale? Something like that. So this card does so much for you. It filters your hand out in the early game to try to dig for like your Leveros or something like that. It puts itself in the drop zone to give you stuff to help with your Dual Knight synergies. Or you can use it for an early game aggro. Or you can use it on your Superior Eye turn for even more attacks. So you can make your 6 attack Thing Saver turn into a 7 attack Thing Saver turn, while also making Violinist live if you needed something else to use a Counterblast. Overall, I love this card. I just wish it was triple rare. But you gotta run it. And now, another thing about the deck is sometimes your opponents will not give you enough damage to use the Counterblast for Thing Saver to fetch your Blaster Blade Seekers. So, one of the things that I decided to add to the deck to make sure that we can do that Superior Call thing for Blaster Blade Seeker, with Levero having that alternate cost, we can pay a Soul Blast to call out the one and only countercharger of the deck, Miranda. All we care about with Miranda is that she says that when you place something over her and you have no face-up damage, you can Soul Charge 1 and Countercharge 1. Well, you Soul Charge 1 regardless if you have face-up damage, but what matters is that, you know, if you have no face-up damage, she's your best friend. Because what you could do is you can try to do things in a way that you can kind of like set up the Countercharge to get your Blaster Blade Seeker out. So whether you're trying to set it up in the main phase or the battle phase, you're going to get that Counterblast because of her. And she's going to make your Thing Saver turns happen as efficiently as you need them to be, if you didn't get all the resources you needed regularly. But overall, you only really need 1. You recycle her so much, you have stuff that could fetch her. With running the 4 copies of Levero and the 2 copies of Cadfael, like, you're running like 7 copies of this card, essentially. You really don't need more than 1. She's just so good. Grade 1s, only 3 different grade 1s, but 12 overall. 4 copies of Sisylas. We want to see Thing Saver. He's one of our main ways of trying to see it, and we have multiple ways of, you know, just kind of digging for it to try to dig Thing Saver even further. Because we only have 1 ride target in this entire deck, we want to see it. 4 copies of the best grade 1 Jewel Knight for this deck. Eunice. She does many important things. 1, if you ride her, your opponent decides, you know, if you ride over her, you can draw a card if your opponent doesn't have anything in the same column. Or, if there is something in the same column when you place something over her, you know, whether she's on the rear guard or on the vanguard, you can retire something on your opponent's rear guard in the same column. If my opponent is willing to sacrifice a card out of their hand to deny me a draw, I already feel like I drew a card. Because then that also means my opponent has less cards to defend the upcoming aggro I'm going to throw their way. On top of that, you know, she is a Soul Fuel card for your Thing Saver, a piece for recursion to kind of bring your toolbox pieces back to the deck, and she gets herself off the battlefield, which is important because remember, Levero can only call grade 2s to an open rearguard circle, so her clearing herself off is huge. And then of course, last grade 1 for Lucius. I want to see this card. I always want to see this card. If I get my 6 attacks, getting my 6 attacks only happens because of Lucius. Heck, sometimes it can even go to 7 because of, you know, Cadfael what? Bleh! Words English hard. Cadfael. That's the word. Okay. But yeah, if you don't know what Lucius does, I believe people should know. But when you ride your Thing Saver during your superior ride turn, because remember, Thing Saver cannot use its skill the turn it was placed. So on your next turn, you don't re-ride. You activate the skill to re-ride to get your force marker during the battle phase. This goes into your soul and calls something from your hand to a rear guard. So if you have your, you attack your rear guards, clear them off, do your stuff. You use him to clear off another spot, replace your front row, and then you can go ahead and do your 6 attacks. I want to see this card. It's so good. That's it for grade 1s, 2s, and 3s, so all we have left is triggers. Very simple. We're not running 8 crit. We're running 6 crit and 6 draw. Because bear in mind, we do want to draw into our pieces. So having a increased chance of hitting a defensive draw trigger in the early game can really matter. So we do want to have just a little bit more draw triggers. Plus, it's going to feel like we're running 8 crit anyway, and we're always going to be just filling our hand constantly. So having the extra draws does really help. And, off case, we do draw into the low shield one. We have Rabble. It could just put it back to deck, and we could try to draw into our other pieces. It's completely fine. And then I like to do my Heal Guardians in the trigger slot. I don't call it a grade 0 slot, I just say it's a trigger slot. We want to live. We have this is an extra target for Sisyllus to try to defend ourselves if our opponent has a super aggressive turn to try to kill us before we hit grade 3. This is our out to it. It's just so important to have Heal Guardians. And then, of course, the only starter I'm allowed to use. Starting Legend Ambrosius. I'm RYsing Legend the Vtuber. I need to have a Legend to go with me. And he's also a dual wielder in case you hadn't noticed. So he fits me. And then, as I was saying before, though, you got your force markers. Force ones are typically what most people will do. And in most cases, you probably should go Force 1. But if you're going second, and you put your opponent to 4 damage, and you're about to ride grade 3, Force 2. Because literally, you can turn your entire board into lethal threats. And your opponent will have to drop so much of their hand to defend. And then literally, if your opponent does live, and they don't have a very strong turn, and you go to your superior ride turn, and you make it to your superior ride turn, that your opponent's likely dead at that point. Some people tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, that Force 2 is a dumb idea. It works. Trust me. And of course, because I'm a Royal Paladin main, I've been playing Royal Paladin for so long, I love the clan so much, I got my Royal Paladin Quick Shield. But anyway, that is roughly about it for this deck profile. I could do like in-depth comboing things, but I feel like it'll be better if I just do like gameplay instead, and kind of just like show you guys in an actual game just how this deck functions. But overall, I really do love this deck so much. Royal Paladin has just always been like a deck that I'm just so fond of playing. But if you guys like this deck profile, go ahead and leave a like on the video. And if you want to see some more content, whether it be Vanguard or just seeing more of me, go ahead and click that subscribe button. And if you want to know when any more videos come out, go ahead and click that notification bell. I think that's everything a YouTuber says. I don't do this often anymore, but I'm going to try to start. But also, if you do want to catch me during any of my live streams, go ahead and check me out on twitch.tv/RYsingLegend with the RY. Yeah, I'm going to try to do some more content on YouTube, so you'll eventually see more of me soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you.